For tonight's lesson, we are doing lesson 69, which is comparing and ordering decimal numbers. To compare decimal numbers, we have to pay close attention to the place value. The decimal point is going to separate the whole number part, which we did yesterday, of a decimal number from the fraction part. So when we look at, for example, our first one, it says compare, I'm going to read it like this, 12.3 and 1.23. When we compare these numbers, we have to look at both the whole number and then the fraction. So even though these numbers, if I were to read them without the decimal point, it would be 123 and 123. I need to pay attention to where my decimal point is because that's going to change the whole number. So here, if I were to read this 12 and 3/10, this number is read 1 and 23 hundredths. So this number right here, this 12 and 3/10, it's a little bit more than 12, but a little bit less than 13. And this number, 1 and 23 hundredths, is a little bit more than 1, but less than 2. So obviously, I'm going to say that my 12 and 3/10 is going to be bigger than my 1 and 23 hundredths. Now we're going to try the second one. I have 2 and 35 hundredths and 2 and 4/10. So I look, the very first thing when I'm comparing to see if a fraction is bigger is I look at the whole number. And here I have 2 and here I have 2. So I know that they're exactly the same. So then I'm going to move to my tenths and I'm going to see which one is bigger. So I have 3 and I have 4. Even though this number has more digits and it looks bigger, there are only 3/10 here, but 4/10 here. And we know that we've talked about there can be as many zeros after a decimal as needed. So if I would put a 0 there, now I can compare 35 hundredths to 40 hundredths, and this fraction would be bigger. But I start with my whole number, then I move to my tenths, and I see which number is bigger there, and then I would move to my hundredths to check that number as well. All right. The third example. Arrange these numbers in order. I'm just going to highlight this from least to greatest. Now be careful. Sometimes in your book or in a test, it might be greatest to least. You never know. Alright, so I'm going to do what I did before. I have 3 numbers here, and they all look, pretty similar. So what I do first is I look at my whole number, and I'm going to see which one is biggest, or I guess which one is the smallest first. 1, 1, and 1. So they're all the same. Next, I'm going to move on to the tenths. So I'm looking for the least. Well, there's 0, 2, and 1. So obviously my 0 one is going to be my smallest. There are 0/10 in that number. So 1 and 2 hundredths is that number. Then I'm going to look at my tenths again. So I have 0, 2, and 1. 1 is the next smallest. So 1 and 12 hundredths. Then the last one, or the biggest fraction here, is 1 and 2/10. Alright, and the last example here, tonight again is a pretty quick lesson. Alright, arrange these numbers in order from least to greatest. So I'm going to highlight that again, underline it least to greatest. Okay, so I'm going to look at my numbers. I always check my whole number first because that is really easy to compare, and I know, what place that they're going to be in. And I have 2, 2, and 2, so they're all about the same. So now we head to the tenths column, the tenths digit, to see which one is bigger or smaller. So I have 4, then I have a 0, and I have a 2. Well, I'm going least to greatest, so my 0 number is going to be written first with 0 in the tenths column. So I have 2 and I have a 0 and a 4, so that would be 4 hundredths. Okay. The next one, I had a 4, a 0, and a 2. 2 is obviously smaller, so I'd write my 2 and 21 hundredths. And then my last number, 2 and 4/10. Now again, even though both of these numbers, they have more digits, they have more numbers in their number, that doesn't mean that they're going to be bigger than 2 and 4/10, because like we talked about earlier, there is kind of a secret 0 there. There are 0 hundredths in this number, but we can leave it blank and just say 4/10. Alright, and for your lesson practice today is exactly what we did, okay? So you have to compare, and these are your two numbers. Alright, compare. And then you have to arrange least to greatest. So if you want to pause your video and write them down, and we will check them again tomorrow.